So why don't we launch right into the training today? Inclusive language is what we are going to be talking about. So you all know me that are on this call, but just for anybody who may be watching this after the fact, my name is Matt Bush. I've been doing the inclusion work now for almost a year, 3/4 of a year, but really drawing on a background of vocational rehabilitation for the last 11 plus years and doing a number of different positions around employment and even some work in our production facility here at VPI in Appleton, Wisconsin. So glad everybody could join us, and thank you for being here. So the goals of today's session really are going to be twofold. We're going to discover how to be a more inclusive communicator. So that's going to be number one. And then number two, we will be improving our awareness of our communication style. Part of any kind of improvement in our lives is just being aware that, there may be some deficiencies and they may not be huge, but there may be things that you just want to tweak. And we really want to continue to grow as a professional, as a person. So those are good things to be aware of. So what is inclusive language? This is a definition that I coined here, drawing on some influences from some past trainings, but really an original definition. Inclusive language is a communication style that is authentic and welcoming, which also enables meaningful and deliberate work from all people. So really that piece about, or those two words, authentic and welcoming, really are going to be keywords that I'm going to draw on as the training progresses here. And then, of course, we're in a work setting, so we are trying to get individuals to have meaningful and deliberate work in our setting, whether that is coworkers here at work in our organization, or whether we are placing a client in a work site. We want to make sure that that work site is practicing inclusive language, and our client is also practicing inclusive language and inclusivity in general, so that they can have meaningful and deliberate work. So what isn't, or what is not inclusive language here? So just as important sometimes as the definition of what something is, sometimes it also helps to know what something is not. And inclusive language is not the language police. I had a colleague a while back, and this individual had a number of words that were really not offensive to most of the population, not all the population, really. And these words are kind of off bounds for this individual. And they policed it very strictly, and it kind of created some friction in the environment. We can have conversations when people are using obviously offensive language, but we don't want to fall in the trap of having an environment where people are walking on eggshells and we have a language police kind of environment. Related to that is inclusive language is not coercive or demanding. These are not things that we're going to get our point across by demanding and being very aggressive as we're trying to advance inclusive language. We're going to do things like modeling. We're going to do things like setting a positive example, and that is extremely effective, much more effective than being coercive or demanding. It goes back to that old saying that you get more bees with honey rather than vinegar, and that really holds true. And then pandering. Pandering is when, I'll use the example, it's easy to pick on politicians when they maybe are giving a speech in a southern state, and all of a sudden, they start developing a southern accent or giving a talk, a salesperson maybe talking to a certain person and they're using phrases that they think that person would use. That is pandering. That is the opposite of authentic. That is changing yourself to be someone that you're not. Inclusive language has to come through your authentic self to connect with that other person's authentic self. So you can't be artificial, you can't be pandering, and then expect to have a good and lasting connection with the person that you're trying to speak to, that you're trying to communicate and connect with. So inclusion is influence really at every level of an organization. We can skip all the way to the green icon there of everyone. But as far as our clients go, they are invested in making an inclusive environment through their language. That's a huge area. Language, behavior, a number of other areas of inclusion. But entry-level staff are also, they're cultivating that environment. You think, well, I'm just, I'm just an entry-level staff. I'm just a new person here, or my job's not very important. That couldn't be further from the truth. Your job is incredibly important in cultivating and creating an environment where inclusion, where everybody feels welcome, where everybody can come to work and do a great job, feel respected, feel like their coworkers are really happy that they're there. And then managers and in senior leadership, obviously, oftentimes they're in the spotlight of maybe creating an inclusive environment and everybody's very happy with the environment, or on the flip side or somewhere in between, everybody's not happy with the environment and they really have the brunt of the responsibility. And some of that is justified. But when we have a mentality of everybody owns this, I'm doing this, managers are doing this, senior leadership is doing this, whomever I am in the organization, in the community at large, that's when inclusion thrives, not pointing our finger at this is somebody else's job. No, it's mine. It's everyone's job. I want to speak to a concept of intent versus impact. I came across this recently and I really wanted to share it with this group because I was, for lack of a better term, I was impacted by it. When you're communicating with a number of people, broad groups of people, different kinds of people, you may have an intended message, and that message may have served you well in the past. It may have been something that you've had a positive impact in the past with a message like that. So you can see over to my left, I don't know if it would be the same on your screen, but that intent individual that is passing through their filters that, yep, this message is good, it's respectful, it's all of these things, it's positive. And then when it gets over to that impact side of the graphic there, it may get caught up on that person's filter, the intended recipient's filter, for one reason or another. I mean, there could be a whole host of reasons. I mean, we won't get into the reasons, but you're having a different impact than you intended. And we can't be aware of every negative impact or every impact that's off of what we intended. We can't possibly be aware of these things. However, sometimes we can be aware of obvious things that we know could have a negative impact on individuals. Something that I try to practice, for example, in my life is I try to keep a fairly even tone. A lot of individuals are negatively impacted by yelling, raising your voice, especially in our field. We have individuals that have sensory issues and they respond negatively to loud noises, to loud speaking. So we may just be intending to communicate something across the distance and we're trying to raise our voice so everyone can hear, but that seems like a threat to that individual. So the impact was not what we intended, and that individual may be scared. That individual may want to shy away from our message. So what we could do is we could just get a smaller group, get closer, and speak in a more subdued, a quieter, a more calm tone. So that's just one example of that. So why don't we jump into really the meat of the lesson here? And this is taken largely from a study by Harvard Business Review of ways to be a more inclusive colleague. And I want to highlight four of the areas that they found. And we're going to jump into each one of these, so I won't read them off now. But why don't we jump right into highlighting the contribution of others? This is one of those things that, if you'll remember, if you stuck around for a number of trainings in this series, this is something that we've talked about in a number of the different trainings, highlighting the contribution of others. Lifting others up is a superpower for inclusion. You think, well, how do I do that? And one of the biggest ways and one of the easiest ways is really to identify coworkers that stand out at their work, who is crushing it on the job. And in our field of helping people and doing a lot of good stuff in the world, I would say this isn't that difficult of a thing. I could point to tons of colleagues on this call, those that are probably going to be listening to it after the fact, and say, you're doing great work. You're doing awesome things each and every day, helping people to find meaningful employment, helping people to be more independent in the community, helping to connect people with counseling resources, all just examples of great things that some of you are doing each and every day. So we could do this in an email. We could do this in a team meeting, just calling out the great work of our colleagues is an incredibly great tool for inclusion. And then assessing our vocabulary. People first language is our standard today. There's a number of things that are constantly changing in the kind of in the vocabulary of our field and in other fields as well. But really, I want to highlight this one very, very important concept of people first language. You can see the old way of saying some of these things and the new way of saying some of these things. And oftentimes when these concepts come up of language that we use to describe someone or something, how do we address it when people are not using this language? Sometimes there's an opportunity for a moment to sit that individual down and have a conversation in private. Or what I've used a lot in the past is modeling. So an individual may say they're handicapped, and I would just say, yes, this person with a disability is doing great work here. So just modeling that, I've had incredible success with this. I've seen changes in my own family where I've modeled the correct way to say things, and lo and behold, individuals are changing their language. They're picking up on that cue. I've seen it at my church and a number of other environments here at work as well. So when it comes to people with disabilities, people who are differently abled, people with mental health illness, this is not something that they're struggling, suffering, afflicted with. They are living with this. This is their life. This is their reality. And to a certain extent, some people may or may not identify, highlight, focus on their disability, even all that much, and that's something that, and to include that individual, that's important for us to pick up on that. Is this a major part of the person's life? It may not be. I use the example of sometimes we may have a hidden illness, disease, something like that, and we don't go around and say, I'm a person that is short-sighted, or I'm a person that, has, an autoimmune disorder. That we may put that on a form at the clinic or doctor's office to gather information, but that's not how we identify ourselves. And sometimes people are that way with their disabilities. So we want to be respecting that and picking up on that. Celebrating with your coworkers, very much related to highlighting the contributions of our team members. What makes your coworkers unique? I'll just speak to some kind of in-house VPI culture here. I do believe we have an awesome team of highlighting and celebrating our coworkers, and that we're looking at birthdays, baby showers, different things that come up, supporting fundraisers for our kids and all of that awesome stuff. This is a great way to do that. Um, Finding unique talents, skills, abilities, and interests, and talking to your coworkers about those, celebrating with your coworkers around those interests, abilities, and talents, and just being curious. This is so important as we work with people. We actually have to have a level of curiosity about people. I say have to intentionally. I mean, in the field of human services, and any field really where you're dealing with a lot of people, sales, all different kinds of fields that maybe aren't human services, you have to be curious about people. And I feel that many of us are that are on this call and that will be watching it in the future. But a way to do this is to just schedule time with that individual. Some of us may not have a ton of time in our day for coffees and lunches and things like that, but be intentional about this. Try to reach out to different individuals and be curious about them. Without being intrusive, ask them questions inside and outside the office. This could be formal, like I said, with the coffee, or informal. Just, I have an office that's by someone, so I'm going to talk with them. I'm going to get involved in their life. I'm going to say hi. If they have a child, I'm going to ask how have things been going with your kids' little league team and things like that. Whatever it may be, whatever fits. How has your garden been going this year? How's that new diet been going? Now, well, maybe that's a hot button, but whatever it may be that this person is interested in, talk with them about it. Don't be intrusive. Some people are more introverted and they may not be interested in this. Pick up on those cues, but for the most part, people like to talk. People like to talk about themselves, and this is a great way to have an inclusive environment. And you just use this information to continue to grow the relationship. We talked about it in an earlier lesson of maybe even making a little note, and sometimes maybe that would seem like going a little bit above and beyond, a little bit too much. But it's not a bad idea for making sure that we're keeping track of individuals and what makes them unique. It's a great way to include people. We're going to be turning a little bit of a corner here and talking about who we should include, how we should get a message out to maximize inclusion of that message. So really thinking about, before sending an email, before getting together a huddle, a group of individuals on our team to talk, who needs to have this information? Does it need to go up? Does this information need to go to my supervisor? Maybe I'm a manager in this organization. Does this information need to go down? Does it need to go to individuals that report to me? Or does it need to go wide? Does it need to go to my colleagues? Maybe a funder, maybe a school district or somebody has rolled out a new policy, and I want to make sure that all of my colleagues are aware of it. Maybe I'm working with a client and this individual has certain things that will really help them to do a great job as we're working with them. And I just want to make everybody on the team aware of that, my colleagues aware of that, that may be working with this individual in the future. This is a great opportunity to go wide with that information, but really thinking about who needs to be included on this information. And then replying uh replying all with caution. That's a very cardinal rule. I'll share an example. I sent a invitation out to a local legislator, and I quickly got back, maybe within a few hours or so, I quickly got back a response that said, I'm not driving to the X, Y, and Z town to go to this. And I was taken back because I just, you have a certain expectation of professionalism and decorum in a professional setting, and I was expecting that. So I just responded back with, I'm sorry to hear that you won't be able to attend. I will include you on communications about these kinds of events in the future. And I said, thank you for your time, have a nice day, that kind of thing. And shortly got a response back that said, oh, I apologize. That was an internal email. We were just determining who was going to be able to attend, and this local legislator would be happy to attend the legislative breakfast. That was an individual that did not look at who they were replying to, because they had included me on it when it should have just been an internal scheduling conversation. I would go back to our professional communication training and say, always communicate professionally, that even if you do reply to the wrong person, uh, it's okay if they read that. So that would be a little bit of feedback for that, but just making sure that we're replying to the right person and that we're replying all with caution. How should I deliver my message for maximum effectiveness, maximum inclusion? Is it something it's just can go out in text? Can it go out in an email? Can it go out in a text message? Maybe I'm communicating to individuals that cannot read or do not have a high level of reading comprehension. Maybe I need to tell them. Maybe I need to do an audio or a video message. Maybe I need to include an interpreter, an ASL interpreter, get it out to the broader community using social media. That might be the way to include more people that need to hear this message. Really thinking about that, going through that list, and just making sure our message is maximally inclusive to all the people that want to get that great information. And then how do I gather feedback on the effectiveness of my message? If we are wanting to experience success in our career, and I believe all of us are, we are going to want to get feedback. And not always just at the end of the year at our review time, or maybe we do that a couple times a year or a couple times a month, or monthly meeting with our supervisor. Maybe we want immediate feedback. Sent out an email and said, hey, what did you think about this? Or even prior to sending out the email, we're consulting with a colleague or a manager on that email, or a presentation like this, a training like this. Hey, what did you think about this training? Did you feel like it was effective? What areas could I have improved? And what were the most effective things that I did? You did ask the intended audience, what did you think about this presentation? This is a great way to make sure you're being inclusive, to make sure that you're being effective in the way that you're speaking. This last slide here, and we are rapidly approaching the conclusion of this training. This last slide here is one that is very important, and I think in some ways startling, because this broader conversation of inclusion in our field of serving individuals with disabilities, individuals with mental health illnesses and barriers, in other ways, is that we've thought that for many years that inclusion was kind of like a done deal, that we were going to get there at some point if we just kept pointed in the right direction, that it was just kind of a foregone conclusion. The numbers that I've come across here from the National Core Indicators, and this was released to a conference, and they were just highlighting the fact that due to the effects of the pandemic, that inclusion from 2020 to 2021, kind of pre 2020 federal fiscal year, so going into 2019 into 2020, pre-pandemic numbers, and then the 2021 numbers being post-pandemic, or more like in the midst of the pandemic, we have really taken some steps back in community inclusion. So we don't want to just be inclusive in our organization. We want to make sure that we're pushing inclusion in the broader field. And these numbers point to the fact that we continue to have some work to do, and actually have some work to do to pick up some ground that we had previously had and now have lost due to the pandemic. Just want to go over a few of these numbers here. 87, and the purple number is the 2020 number, the red number, or I think red is the 2021 number. 87% compared to, or going to 72%, reported having run errands in the past month. That number actually fell 87 to 22. And then individuals that reported having gone out for entertainment in the past month fell 77 to 40%. That's a staggering drop there. And then the percentage of people with a disability who've reported going out to eat in the past month fell from 86 to 58%. Now, some of you may be thinking, we do a lot of events, we do a lot of things with the individuals that we work with, but you have to think about the entire population of people with disabilities. Not everybody's involved in a program like the one that we have the blessing and the opportunity of presenting and giving to the people of our community. Not everybody has access to that kind of program. And there's a trend among our field that we don't want to make duplicate services. So there may be one service provider that is saying they're offering something that they may not even be offering. They may be saying, yeah, we're doing all of these inclusion events, we're getting the individuals out in the community, and that just may not be happening. That's a horrible thing, but it is a reality. So I want to just say, inclusion is not a done deal. It's not a done deal in our workplaces. It's not a done deal in the field of serving people with disabilities. We need to continue to be examples of this. We need to continue to push this forward. We need to continue to move this forward in the work that we do each and every day. And I know that all of you are doing that, and I trust that many that will be on the call, if not all, that will be viewing this training rather at a later time, are interested in this work and are doing this work as well. So that's the training, folks. I appreciate you joining for the training today, and I hope that you have gotten something out of it. I will just quickly show some of my sources here that you can see some of the different sources and information that I relied on for this training. Thank you very much for joining us here today.